training has to be present to gain muscle to the maximum that your biochemistry can allow. Like you can't just testosterone your way to muscle if you don't work out. Nothing's going to happen.
Bringing you a reasoned approach to health and fitness. This is the Phi Life Podcast.
Welcome to the Phi Life Podcast. I'm John Barbin. With me is Brad Pilon. And today we're going to talk about the transient nature of muscle mass. But before we get to that, we're brought to you by the Total T Clinic, as usual. So this came up. I recently did a DEXA, and I've done DEXA scans.
What's a DEXA, John?
All right. It's a way of measuring body fat that can do regional measurements. So kind of like across your whole body. It's not, it has its potential shortcomings as well. Like I mean, most people consider it the gold standard, versus doing calipers or doing, the bioimpedance scales or bod pod or any of that. So underwater weighing we did in university just to learn like where it's rooted in, but that's absurd. No one's ever going to do that. Like you actually have to dunk someone in a tank of water. And it's got, even though that's how you might have calibrated these things and it scientifically might have been the gold standard, it's utterly impractical and no one will ever do it. So DEXA seems to be about as accurate as you can get. And so we've done these multiple times throughout the years. I mean, I've got
a lot, man. I've got like a dozen easily.
Yeah, I've got them going back to at least 2012.
That's mine too, yeah.
Right. So, and the kind of interesting thing that we wanted to talk about is muscle, like as you work out to gain muscle, people have this thought that it's either there or it's gone, and then it somehow doesn't come back, which I don't understand where that comes from. It's quite obvious if you've ever broken an arm or something and it's been in a cast, and while it's fully immobilized, you know that the arm shrinks, and then when you're out of the cast, it doesn't take long for you to build the muscle mass back up. And the interesting thing is it's not like it takes you all the years it took you to build the muscle back to what it was. A good example was a good friend of ours tore his bicep down here by like the elbow, which is super rare, and it ripped right off. His arm was in a cast for whatever it took, right? 2 months, whatever it took for it to heal.
That was a long one. Yeah.
And then when it came out of the cast, his arm was tiny. It was like he'd never worked out before in his life.
The hair was all black. Remember that? Yeah.
Well, it was just really, really tiny. And he had really well developed arms, right? He was in his 30s or whatever, he'd been working out his whole life. So it's not like it took him another 15 years to build the arm back up to its full size. It took him like 12 weeks of training and his arm was right back to its full size.
Yeah.
So it can come back, and there's something, this is like the concept of muscle memory. Once it's been built to a certain size, it seems as though you can always get it back to that size. Now, steroids and testosterone notwithstanding, we'll talk about that later, but assuming your testosterone hasn't changed, that's a big assumption.
Yeah.
Either naturally or you're on TRT, or you're actually doing a cycle of steroids. Those things dictate how big the muscle could get. But assuming it's just whatever your natural test can do. Just you, right? The muscle should be able to come back to whatever size it was if you take time off, if it's immobilized, even if you tear the muscle, even if you break a bone. With this, once you get back to training, it should come back. And this kind of should, comfort someone who feel, if they've seen that they've lost lean mass, you should realize it's not gone. It's just deflated, maybe is the best way to say it.
Yeah, we've actually looked into sarcopenia, which is the amount of muscle you sort of lose just by they think the natural aging process, but now they're questioning if it's a lifestyle thing. And they're realizing now that even in your 70s and 80s, with a proper diet and exercise program, the ability to start building back up is present. So it's not like it's gone and you can never do it. You can build back up. Now, you're probably not going to build back up to the level of your 30s without some sort of hormonal help, but you can build back up. So that ability is always there. That memory is always there.
Right. And so let's just let's just jump right into the numbers, because this will kind of lead us into this discussion. So I somehow, and I didn't mean to do this, but I've inadvertently showed up for 4 different DEXA scans since 2012 at almost the identical body weight. And I book these months ahead, and I don't really know how big I'm going to be or small I'm going to be at the time, but somehow I ended up within a pound of the same body weight, which made actually for an interesting little experiment here.
Within a pound, eh?
Within a pound. So, and this is an example of body composition and how much you weigh versus how much of that is lean mass and fat mass on the same person can be pretty different. And the way you look at that same body weight can be quite different. And a lot of it has to do with if you've been training or not and how hard you've been training. So, and in my case, a complete and utter lack of testosterone or testosterone being present. So I'll kind of walk you through some of this. So December 2013, so this is a long time ago, whatever that is, 11 years ago. I weighed 196.9 pounds at this DEXA scan. And setting aside any of the potential errors in DEXA, at least we're just still using a DEXA, so the comparison should hold. This particular time, the machine said I was 12.1% body fat with 166 pounds of lean mass and 29 pounds, let's see here, and 23 pounds of fat. So that's one setup of me being 196 and a bit.
Right.
Then in another instance, on the February 2019, so many years later, 196.6, so within 0.3 pounds of the same body weight.
Okay.
This time around, I'm 15.4% fat, so over 3 and a bit percent higher, with 160 pounds lean mass, so 6 pounds less lean mass, whatever the lean mass compartment really is. And as per the DEXA, 29 pounds of fat. So that's 6 more pounds of fat, roughly
6 less pounds of muscle.
6 less pounds of muscle. That's a 12-pound swing. So no wonder in one case it says I'm 12% body fat, in the other case it says I'm 15.4. And obviously if I can't stand next to myself 10 years later, but I'd imagine the 2013 look is just better than the 2019 look.
Yeah, those are radically different percentages for your body, right? Like that jump down to 12, that's a lean you, and the 15% not so much.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like that's in that range where you have that very noticeable difference is right there for you. So yeah, you would look completely different there.
But it really it can mess you up that you weigh the same. So you could think, well, I'm kind of okay. I'm doing my thing. Right?
And
like,
so think about it this way, though. In between those two times, you hired a trainer, didn't hire a trainer, and your weight didn't change. But let's just say the opposite happened. You went up 6 pounds and lost 6. Depending on how aware you are of what you look like in a mirror, you might be like, nothing's happening.
Right. And now one argument could be I'm just 10 years older. But also it could be training status. I know, if I think about it, I know at that time I was traveling a lot. I don't know how. My guess is I just wasn't training as consistently or as hard. Clearly, I couldn't have been if this was this different, right? So I was on TRT that whole time, so that was constant. So it can't really be the effect of testosterone. So, knowing that that's constant, knowing that my body weight was identical, to me, the obvious thing was I must have not been training as consistently to just lose that much lean mass and gain that much fat mass and just sort of be the same size.
Oh, do you have the compartments there? Can you look at lower body and legs?
I don't have it all. I'd have to pull it up. I mean, suffice to say, it'll appear in all of those areas.
Yeah. So legs are about 50% of a man's lean mass. So you can see some big differences. Then that gives you an idea when you see legs and appendicular, so arms and legs, lets you know if the difference is skeletal muscle versus changes with your organs or how much food's in your system, right? If legs have changed, it's muscle. There's no stomach in there messing things up.
Appendicular. Yeah, that's a good point. If the change is reflected mostly in your limbs, then that usually means it's the skeletal muscle. It's not that it's not that on the day you went in, you just had a big meal and somehow a lot of the food you ate the day before is registering as lean mass or not lean mass.
We were lucky enough, we have friend who owns a DEXA clinic, so we were able to play with that a bit. And yeah, if you go in on a full stomach, that's more lean mass. Just that it doesn't know how to register that difference. So
just drink a bunch of water.
Yeah, just drink a bunch of water, but you can't fool the arms and legs. That they tell you the true story.
Right. So okay, so that's 2. That's 10 years apart, same body weight, big difference in lean versus fat mass. And then the more interesting thing is, and this gets into the testosterone thing and definitely the lack of training. So I have 2 measurements here. One of them was January, February, March, April, May. In May of 2023. Now, there's a bit of a story to this. I had just had lung cancer surgery in February 2023. Post-surgery, I woke up with a paralyzed vocal cord, and I also couldn't go to the gym for at least a month or 2. I was like strictly wasn't allowed to work out. Me and Brad would just walk around the mall with the mall walkers. That's the best I could do. And I had a violent cough. So I couldn't, not only could I not work out, breathing was like getting my heart rate up just from walking in the mall. Sometimes I just have to stop and just cough violently, which is not which fun. Also for a bunch of 90-year-old mall walkers made John really, really popular. Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. Oh yeah, I needed all kinds of codeine, cough syrup, and testosterone, anything to try to control it. It was pretty awful. Yeah. Those coughs multiple times led to vomiting. Like that's how bad it was. Anyways,
I didn't know that.
Anyways, the point is post surgery didn't work out. And this measurement that I'm about to talk about was the first DEXA I did, and I might have maybe just started going to the gym at the time. And the other interesting thing is, and it's not just 3 months of not training. Going into that surgery, I was living in California, but the surgery happened in Canada, so I was on flights back and forth for the 2 months previous to the surgery, getting tests done and getting prepped for it. So I essentially spent 5 months not training basically at all. Yeah. Now, stage 1 cancer, it's not the cancer causing any wasting. Like this was not a metastatic cancer. It has nothing to do with that. It was a single tumor that we got. So just if people are thinking, oh, you had cancer, it's like, that's not why I was losing muscle mass. I literally hadn't trained for close to 5 months. And the other, so I haven't been training for roughly 5 months. So I measure in at 196.4 pounds, exact same body weight again. But this time, my body fat percentage is 18.9.
Wow, okay.
Same body weight. Body fat percentage, 18.9. Fat tissue. Remember, in my leanest so far, the total fat was 23 pounds at 12% body fat. Then at 15.4, it was 29 pounds of actual total fat. This time, it was 35 pounds of actual total fat.
Wow.
But I still weigh 196, exact same body weight. Yeah. But my lean mass had dropped from 166 to 160 all the way to 153. So
is that lean mass, fat-free mass and bone together? I imagine it is the way they're doing their DEXAs, right? This is another thing. If you do DEXAs at different locations, the software is different, so you might not that's
get.
What I was getting at.
Yeah, the older DEXA scans have a lot more detailed information. This one has a more summarized information. So I only have the one lean tissue. I don't have the bone.
The two. Okay, so either way, that would be the amount we would expect on someone now 2 inches shorter than you. Like, so me at 5'10", 150 would be fairly average. That's kind of our gold standard. Then at 150 at 5'10", for every inch in height, we add about 7 pounds of lean mass. So you'd expect John to be about 164 really built, not 150 is not good.
Yeah. So
just letting you know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Great. Yeah. Perfect. So just nailing home the point that I'm way below average.
Yeah.
So in this case, a lack of training for close to 6 months. I'm down to almost 166 to 153. What's that? 12, 13 pounds of lean mass. And I'm up what? Almost 12 pounds of fat mass. Yet I weigh the same, and my body fat percentage is all the way up to almost 19. Now, another interesting number in between all of that. Now I do weigh less this time. October 2023,
So how far are we talking now?
This is five more months now. Five more months
later.
where I
Okay.
finally started to exercise. Like I've been training solidly for 5 months, but quite now looking back, this is not a good idea. I don't know why. It just seems stupid. I chose to go off of testosterone replacement to see if my body could actually recover. And
so just to be clear, you went through cancer treatment, then the throat with the vocal cord, and then the tons of time without training and on codeine, and you're like, now is a good time to try to get off TRT and see if my body can respond. Yeah,
now it sounds so stupid, but back then
it was dumb back then too, man.
I know, but I was like, well, I might as well. I'm doing it now. Might as well see if this works. So it was it was an experiment to see if the TRT was having any influence on cholesterol and lipids. Again, why do it then? Why not spend the year recovering and then it's hindsight's 2020. It's so dumb to do it then. So anyways, I go off of TRT, and 6 months of being off TRT, my levels I was testing every 4 weeks, and my testosterone levels just dropped and dropped and dropped to the point where they went all the way down. Okay, on the measurement scale that goes from 250 to 1,000 or 1,100, depending on which lab and which country.
Yeah,
I dropped from cruising around 900 to 36, not 360.
36
was where it bottomed out.
That's enough to be like measurement error and just be zero. Actually, like
that's like an average woman's higher than 36.
Yeah, and to be clear, you work with a testosterone clinic.
Yeah,
where you live. So these aren't like random numbers from different labs. This is the same lab.
No, it's a consistent, repeatable, right?
Yeah.
And I was training like as hard. I was training as hard as I could train at that, which I'll tell you is pathetic. So no matter how hard I was pushing, I just kept getting weaker and smaller and weaker and smaller.
So so run me through, just because 36 is something I'm just trying to wrap my head around. Like, did training hurt? Like what? How did it feel? I was always trying to describe this, and I couldn't get the word. I didn't know how to describe it. It felt like, do you know when you maybe first wake up and you haven't had a good night's sleep, and you yawn a couple times in the morning, and you should get up, but you're like, oh, I just need to lie here for just 30 more seconds. And there's like an exhaustion that you haven't done anything. It's just not there yet. Like you're just not awake yet. Another big breath in might be the one that wakes you up. Imagine anyone who's been a dad with a newborn right now is like nodding at you. Like,
best way to describe it: utterly sleep deprived, utterly chronically sleep deprived,
like all day.
Well, the specific feeling of trying to exercise, trying to actually push weights. It's a bizarre feeling. I don't even know how to describe it, but it was like there's no shove in there. There's no, you can't muster up the energy no matter how much you try. And it manifests itself clearly in a loss of muscle mass and a loss of strength. So and I was going diligently to the gym, and I would just actually get weaker week over week and smaller. Do you remember Dr.
Comer? And he had a business partner, and his business partner, just a doctor we know, he would always talk about that feeling as when testosterone high, you have gusto, right? And then he's like, when you don't, you just don't. So I see what you mean, like a kind of a push, a drive.
And it's like sort of, it's hard to describe, but the feeling is like deep in your body, like it just isn't there. Imagine taking a deep breath and it's utterly not satisfying. It's like you took a deep breath and no, you didn't get any air in. Even though you took a deep breath, it's like no air went in. It's hard to describe. It's palpable. It's palpable that you literally do not have what you used to have. I don't know how else to describe that.
And you know what it feels like to be that low, normal, and elevated, right? So,
well, I mean, I was on steroids in college. I know what it feels like to have 10 times as much.
And is it the opposite of that? Like, is it just energy and push and drive? And
oh yeah, you feel like you're wearing the Iron Man suit.
Oh, that's awesome.
I shouldn't talk too much about it. It feels great. Like it's if it didn't have potentially negative side effects, I tell everyone to be on at the highest level all the time for how good it feels. But obviously, if you start measuring blood levels and liver enzymes, and you're not doing yourself favors being that high. It's going to cause trouble over time. But in the moment, anyone who's done a cycle knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
And there's a sense of well-being. There's definitely something like mood enhancing, and we don't have a lot of data on it because
like
nobody.
a euphoria to it? Is that what you're almost like? Or just your ego because you're so big? Like it's beyond that.
It's a good question. Is it psychosomatic? Just because? No, I know. Well,
Too
obviously,
quick, right?
it's too tangled up because you see yourself getting. You know what? No, because I had dysmorphia to the point where I didn't know I was big. So, right, I couldn't tell I was bigger than anyone else. I just thought I was the same size as whoever was around me. So it probably isn't that. Maybe there's some social feedback, especially doing it in college, because like at that age, at that time, you're getting a lot of feedback where maybe as a later in life, no one cares.
No one cares.
It's not a big deal. So there could be some social effect that you can't measure, but there's for sure like a well-being, like a definite well-being effect. Like it feels good, and it feels good to be like that strong, and it happens like the strength just keeps coming. So there's like a sense of progress. Like, oh my God, that can keep going.
It's actually worthwhile going to the gym because you make gains.
Well, the gains come so fast that like it's the feedback might also feel good because it just works. It's just happening. Whereas like other people are grinding out sets and you're like, well, okay, but like I know I'm going to be a certain percent stronger literally by next week, and then again, and then again, and then again. So maybe like a forward momentum, but there's certainly some biochemical. It just feels good. So, anyways, we're talking that's supraphysiological. Yeah. And now I'm hypophysiological. I'm way off the bottom of the scale at this point. So this is another 5 to 6 months later. Now I'm training as hard as I can. I'm getting nowhere. I did manage to lose some body weight, but it didn't help that much because I was still holding 30 pounds of body fat. So I lost a bit of body fat, but like 5 pounds.
Yeah.
But my lean mass dropped all the way to 150. So that's like the lowest my lean mass. Again, so we're talking 153.5 to 150. So I dropped another 3.5 pounds of lean mass, training as hard as I could. So so then at that point, I'm only 188 pounds, but I'm still almost 17% body fat. So like I'm getting nowhere here.
So you're doing that exact what like a lot of people experience when they try hard is you just slowly get skinny fat, for lack of better terms, what they call it, right? But you're everything's moving in the right direction and you look and feel worse.
Well,
right?
So this is the thing. In about 6 months, I lost almost 10 pounds and I only went from 19% body fat to 17% body fat. I lost 5 pounds of fat, but I lost like almost 5 pounds of muscle. So it was really, I was just shrinking. And
so you can imagine a person who has low tests and doesn't know it, trying to get in shape and dieting and training and just getting this effect. You'd be like, what? This sucks. Right?
Well,
like,
how about this? Not training at all or training as hard as you can with essentially no testosterone in your body, they're both the same effect. You just lose mass no matter what. So,
okay.
And I might have even done a better job just not training. And you know what? No, it's almost even. In both cases, I just started losing mass. And now along the way, in both cases, I also gained fat mass. So there's probably some connection there. But anyways, so off of testosterone for about 6 months, training as hard as I can. And actually losing some fat, but percentage wise, I'm still almost 17% body fat and down to my lowest lean mass in my adult life, which is pretty discouraging. And it was so obvious in the gym. I just kept getting weaker. And I was struggling with weights I haven't struggled with since I was 17.
Now so just to clarify, that 37, but you figured out you had some sort of genetic thing, remember?
Well, yeah, hypogonadism came up in my genetic testing. So we'll never know if I could have recovered or if this manifested. Right. This was going to manifest. It can manifest at any age in life, at middle age.
People who are listening, right, with John's very low numbers. And you might be thinking, okay, well, that's just guys who go off of TRT or off of testosterone. But we know a number of guys now who there's a direct link between a concussion history and testosterone. And we had a friend, he was in a car accident when he was young, like he had massive scar. I think he had like brain surgery because of it. And just talking about how he was never able to, like, he's like, training just didn't work for him. It just doesn't work. And he goes, if I diet, I just get gross looking. And so we were out with him and we were like, why don't you just get your testosterone checked? And yeah, he came in at like 57, 58, same thing. And then went on testosterone. How long was he? Oh, dude, he was in the accident when he was like 14, 15, and he was probably late 20s when we talked to him. And then since then has gone on testosterone and just completely changed his life. And then we have another friend who was a high-level rugby player all through high school and university. And same thing, finally realizing that like a lot of his problems were just the multiple concussions is most likely the connection. But this guy hit someone so hard once he detached his retina. Like rugby's crazy, but his test was super, super low. Not quite to your level, like in the low 100s, but same thing. So it isn't just guys who are kind of sort of low and go on TRT and then come off and are really low. There are a lot of guys out there who may not know due to a history of sports or military work or car accidents who have very low levels of test because of the concussive force or whatever happened to their head. So this could be affecting someone listening who wasn't just going off a test. If you're listening to what John's saying and being like, it kind of sounds familiar, just get it tested, right? Find out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if everyone's different. Like people can, I mean, I've had multiple physicians who are like, oh yeah, I've got lots of clients who've gone on TRT for a while, come off and they've recovered. So I don't know if I didn't give it enough time, but I don't know how much longer I could.
A lot of time.
6 months was pathetic. It got back to like 125, 130. That's about it. So it's like still never got even in remotely into the range. So, I mean, put it this way. If it was going to take another 6 months, there's no way I was to last another 6 months like that. That was just a miserable existence. So I'm happy to be back on and the way it feels now, I feel like normal again, like alive again. Okay, so which brings me to the last measurement, which was just now, just a couple days ago, back to 196. Here we go again, 196.8. So the same, somehow I keep landing on that same, and I'm never planning this. I don't know what I weigh on the day I go in. I just keep seem to show up at that same weight. This time I'm 12.8% body fat. So kind of remind back to what I was like in 2013, 11 years ago. Very, very similar body fat to that, 12.8. 24 pounds of fat tissue. Back then it was 23. So, and that makes sense. I was 12.1% fat then, 12.8 makes sense. The fat's a bit higher. So 24 pounds of fat versus 23, 12 years or 11 years ago. And my lean tissue is 165, where back then it was 166.
Yeah.
So, which
is exactly the amount we'd want you at 6 foot, basically.
And training consistently with like no injuries, nothing getting in the way. Like training is, training actually. So that was
is this 90 days later. Is that what we're getting at here? Like 3 months?
Yeah, about three, let's see here, just over 3 months later. So it didn't kind of like the broken arm. It took about 3 months to gain 14 pounds of muscle, basically get back to where I was before the cancer, all this mess started in the first place.
Right.
So to arrive back where I started and doing the stupid idea of going off testosterone right after the surgery, it was, again, dumb idea, but it served as a pretty interesting experiment that now 50 years old, I'm back to the, 12 something percent body fat, which isn't bad, right? I couldn't do a photo shoot right now, but I think it's not bad. Like it's good. It's
within
a good
striking distance, as we say. Yeah.
Right. But it's not a bad size. I'm the same weight as I was 11 years ago. I'm within a pound of the same fat, and I'm within 1% of the body fat percentage, and I'm within a pound of the lean tissue, lean mass. So that's not bad. But it just shows you between then and now, I've been up and down 15 almost pounds of lean mass and up and down 10 over 12, 13 pounds of fat mass at the same body weight. So it's just, the point is you can weigh the same, and depending on your training status, you can be dramatically different in body fat percent. Like some of these body fat percentages, that's not that healthy. Like that's actually a fair bit of fat. Like the difference between having literally 35 pounds of fat on your body or 20 or 24, like that's 11 pounds less fat, and the visceral fat's much, much lower. So it's the same. This is what I guess what people think they mean when they're talking about recomp, but I'm not doing anything specifically to recomp. I'm just training as much as I can to gain as much muscle as I can, and paying attention to diet as to not gain fat. And really all I've done is arrive back at the tissue I keep saying lean, the lean body mass I was 10 years ago. The thing is, I wasn't doing scans all throughout those 10 years, so I'm sure I was kind of on a sine wave, a little bit more, a little bit less, but pretty consistently somewhere 95, 196 is a decent weight for me. If I push it, I can get, below into the upper 180s, and that's when the pictures, if you Google search me and see pictures, I'm 180 something, 185,
right?
187,
188
or something. Yeah. Oh, as a comparison. Okay. So, the conditioning I was during those pictures back in 2012, I think it is, I was 10.6% body fat. So again, just not that much less than some of these other numbers, but the fat mass dropped all the way to 19 pounds and lean, but I also lost some lean along the way down. I was 160 pounds of lean. So it's hard. It's really, really hard to keep lean mass at its peak as you're dieting down. Like it's some amount of it's going to go with it. Now, again, as per the DEXA, that could just be, and we know
food.
Water, food. We know that when you're dieting down, you're just eating less total food. There's less total water. You're just carrying less carbs in general, which all of that measures as lean, right?
Yeah.
So Brad brought up a good point. The better way to discuss this would be if I was looking at appendicular. So the exact muscle, again, exact muscle the DEXA shows I had on both legs and on both arms. And then we can take away that variable of, well, did you just eat a big meal? And is there a pound of food, undigested food, that's registering as lean mass or not in your stomach? So, but it's suffice it to say, it holds that when I'm at my leanest, I'm not at my highest lean mass percentage, like or total lean mass when I'm at my leanest body fat, as for the look, I guess you could say. And that kind of gets to what bodybuilders do that's different than what the average person dieting down. And they're wondering like, I kind of look flatter. How come I don't look like, what the images I'm looking at online? Well, if you keep moving the testosterone and anabolics up while you're dieting your way down, you're going to hold that lean mass. Like me and story, me and Brad have seen a couple people do this and they looked fantastic on stage. And it's funny, we would say they dieted down from 190 to 205.
Yeah. It was insane.
Yeah. So they managed to actually gain significant
losing fat, gain muscle.
Yeah, but a dramatic amount, which is
like enough to change your total body weight.
Quite unrealistic.
Yeah. So I've noticed similar things. So, I mean, since 2012, I was 34, 36. I can't do the math. 36 probably, right? But very first DEXA, 20 pounds of fat, 148 pounds lean. And what's really, really interesting about this is in 2013, similar to your experience, I had to stop training at a cyst removed, and I was only off of training for 2 months. And I went down from 147 lean to 137 lean. And then in July, picked up training, and just like twice a day, like nothing worse than coming off of not being able to train midsummer Canada. Like we've got 2 months to have our shirts off, right? So I just went Hail Mary for it. And by September was right back up to 147 lean. So 10 pounds, right? Had we been smart, we would have just not trained, taken pictures, trained, and then those would have been amazing transformations and made millions online, but we're dumb. So we didn't do that. But it goes to show, right? You can lose it pretty quickly, but then you can, now remember my test is always, I'm trying to do the conversions to American, 700, right? Like it's on the higher side of normal, just always has been. So I think my ability to kind of bounce back is probably part of that. And then ever since, so 147 lean in 2013, and then big gap where we didn't test at all, but 2017, 143 lean, Then at 40 years old, like on my birthday in 2018, 142 lean. And then at 43 in 2020, 142 lean again. And then that whole time is like every time we go in for a DEXA, my body fat's 20. Like 20.2, 20.1, 20.3. So kind of like how you normalize for weight, I tend to normalize for body fat, probably because there's a certain look I like when I want to go get a DEXA, right? Like, so, but my body weight's always between 165 and 175 in all of these. But the interesting thing about the drop and then the rebound, right? Now you experienced it on TRT and I've experienced it not on TRT. But I often wonder about what I think of as the Hollywood effect. And we wrote about this way, way back when Ryan Reynolds first did, he had done Blade 2, which one of the first movies where Ryan Reynolds went from Van Wilder to like Ryan Reynolds, right? And like he was built. And then after that, he started doing not really action movies yet, but more rom-coms. So he's always kind of the built guy. And there was an article about him, and he was saying he's just getting better at knowing how to do this because he doesn't train at the time. I think he trains all the time now because he's older. He's like our age, I think. But at the time, he didn't train. He would just go 10 months out of the year not training. And then, oh my God, I got to roll and they want me to look jacked. So for 2 or 3 months, I'm just going to go at this. So not the whole Marvel DC world now where everyone talks about how they started prepping a year in advance, that kind of thing. Like from the article, it sounded like Ryan Reynolds was like, crap, I got 12 weeks. I'm going to turn this around. But I think that muscle memory, it's almost like they're doing it the right way, right? Just like spend the big portion of the year just being active, right? And then, oh crap, I got to get bigger for a role and just hit for 10, 12 weeks and kind of get yourself back up to that sort of your peak physique sort of thing. And so I think that's what happens with you and I after time off, is then just being able to build back, because it's really important on these that we make sure that people know when I went from 137 to 147 lean, that a couple 6 months before that, I was 147 lean. So I'm just building back up 10 pounds, right? That wasn't 10 new pounds of muscle on me. My numbers will be a bit different than John's because where we go in Canada, lean is divided out by bone mass. So I'd be 147 lean plus probably about 7 pounds of bone mass, of skeletal mass. So all my numbers are about 6 or 7 pounds lower than I say they would be at John's, just depending on if they include or don't include bone mass in the measurements.
Yeah, well, I think the lean's still the same. This one just doesn't put the bone mass in the chart. Right.
So yeah, I've had very similar. I should probably go. It's been 4 years. Go and see how it's going, because my lean is slowly going down. I've noticed that my bone cell mass, my BCM, is also slowly decreasing. I mean, from a 7.2 to a 6.9 sort of thing. So it'd be interesting to see where it is now at 47, if it's continuing along that trend or if I've stabilized. But it is very fascinating, and with lean mass, watching it change, and throughout these measurements that John and I have done, we're going to try training twice a week. We're going to train twice a day. We're going to try, like, we were experimenting with different things, right? So, and then in terms of the numbers, right? For the other thing that's interesting for me is I'll have to go back and figure out exactly when I started eating like a plant-based diet. But is the slow loss of lean mass just me getting older and not caring as much, or is it nutritionally based? So that'd be interesting to look at as well. But for, since 2017 to basically now, to lose a pound or two of lean mass isn't too bad, in my opinion. Yeah. Right. So, well, especially considering the effort I'm putting in the gym right now, which is 80% kind of thing.
Yeah.
So.
And that's a good point. So that's what I was going to touch on a few things here. So my little experiment, I inadvertently did a 2-part experiment here where, and again, it all works because I just kept arriving back at the same body weight. Not training, I lost lean mass and gained fat mass, but stayed the same body weight. Going off of testosterone, but training as hard as I could, I lost lean mass and gained body fat. So in both cases, training, you have to train. But on the other side of it, if you don't have enough testosterone in your system, that's it. You're going to only get as big as the amount of testosterone that your system allows, Let's say it that way.
So back to our whole on purpose thing, your body's like, on purpose, based on the amount of tests you have, this is the lean mass you get to support. It's not like, it's not a mistake. Right. It's not like, that's the math it's using.
And it's from what I can tell, and it anecdotally plus, observationally, it's linear. The more testosterone you have, the bigger you can get.
Yeah. And we have dozens, like not just our DEXAs, we have dozens of other people's DEXAs that we kind of look at on a regular basis. Right. And that tends to be the guys who are on are bigger. Always.
Well, and just look at bodybuilding. I mean, it's so obvious, right? Yeah. But in my case, if you drop your test to basically off the bottom of the chart, you're going to shrink no matter how hard you train. So training has to be present. Training has to be present to gain muscle to the maximum that your biochemistry can allow. Like you can't just testosterone your way to muscle if you don't work out. Nothing's going to happen. Like you're just going to have a lot of testosterone in you, but you're not actually going to get anywhere muscle mass wise. But if you train, you can maximize the amount of muscle that testosterone can support. So, but both have to be present. So if over years, like your third decade of life, your fourth decade, your fifth decade, you're training just as hard, but somehow you just keep getting weaker, it might be worth, and you can tell I'm not as strong. I don't even look as good anymore. It might be worth going to check to see if you're actually just getting lower in testosterone. That could easily be what's going on. The other thing, my bone density dropped when I was off as bad. When I was off the testosterone for those, bone density went right in the toilet as well.
Really?
So, oh yeah. So, which is kind of crazy. It's never done that before. So I think I don't know if it's direct or if it's indirect because I was so weak. Like I was so weak in the gym, I couldn't even maintain the bone mass. So there's multiple effects there. Also, on top of that, training intensity wasn't good. I was getting injured way easier. Joints were getting inflamed, just old joint feelings that I just haven't had in a long, long time since before I was on TRT, where things just felt lousy. We're all coming back. It was a real effort to get through a leg workout without knees hurting and hips hurting. But then as soon as I reintroduced the TRT, that started to fade. It took a few months, but that started to fade. And then I was just healing better too. So that's definitely a thing. I guess it's kind of helpful that I did this experiment. I didn't expect to drop this low, but the fact that I did, and now I have a real experience of how crappy it feels to be that low. And not only was I weak, not only did bone density go down, the recovery just sucked. I just wasn't recovering, which is just a spiral, because how do you keep training with any vigor if you feel lousy and your joints are inflamed? So it's just, all of it just leads to just deterioration. So I guess it's not even worth trying to pick out if there's one thing at the root of all of it, because they all go together. If your joints aren't healing, how do you go do a good workout to try to build the muscle if your joints just keep hurting? So
I was thinking of that about my experience, right? Because you wonder if even that time off helped, right? Sort of a rebound. And then as someone who, especially in 2013, we're just coming into being online people. So it was important to me to get back. The training I did to get from 137 back up to 147 was on purpose. There was intent, right? I did not like being that small. It didn't fit with my persona of who I am or my vision. So that wasn't me just getting back into the gym. That was me getting back into the gym. And so that might have made a difference there too. How quickly it came back.
And so I'm 50 now. So it's regardless if I have TRT, literally testosterone fixed at a number, I guess it's reasonable that I just can't generate the same force and can't recover quite the same as when I was 40 or 35. Yeah. Even if testosterone is exactly the same line, there's probably other things going on, and it's just not the same. If that wasn't the case, it stands to reason that if you just parked your testosterone at a certain number, you just look like that the whole rest of your life. But that can't be.
It doesn't. Yeah. No.
I don't think we have any example of that. If someone 50 years old, 60 or 70 years old, as long as my testosterone is the same as it was when I was 20, I'm going to look like I'm 20. That's not the case. Other things are going on that are sarcopenia is going to happen. A loss of bone density is going to happen no matter how much testosterone is in your system.
Yeah.
So, but it's instructive that 12 years or 11 years later, I still landed back at the same lean tissue. Now, the other thing is, and maybe people don't want to hear this, it's likely you have to train more consistently the older you get in order to keep that tissue, that lean mass from deteriorating, which kind of sucks because we've all, if you've started training in high school the way we did, you probably peaked out in your late 20s, early 30s to your maximum muscle mass, your maximum strength. Like I can't get anywhere near those numbers now. Not even close.
27 to 32, 33, that's the golden spot for guys for that kind of thing.
You know what's interesting about that? I just thought of this. Even though I'm at the exact same lean mass as I was 11 years ago, there's and same body weight, there's no way I can push the same amount of weight in the gym. So the performance of the actual muscle, again, as per measured by DEXA, I'm assuming it's more or less the same, right? Like the same muscle mass. Yeah. I just can't do the same weight I could do then now, yet my composition's pretty similar. So there's something about strength that if you have trained consistently, your strength will peak out somewhere in your 20s and 30s.
Oh, but strength is a whole other podcast, right? In terms of rate of force development and stuff like that. Yeah.
Right. But that peaking of strength at that age doesn't mean you can't be 25 years later similar body composition. You just won't be as strong.
No. Yeah. Well, and if you think about, a great example is that you can have two guys who are almost identical clones in physique and look in the gym, and one can be just immensely stronger than the other. So yeah, you can definitely build back that mass at an older age. It just might not be as strong, which means you have to do a bit more work in the gym because you're not doing the same push, right?
Yeah.
The same intensity.
Right. So it's kind of sort of a bummer, right? Like the older you get, the more you have to train.
Yeah.
Like just to not shrink. You're not going to get any better. You're just not going to look, you're just slowing down the process of looking worse.
I think the good thing is you have that in, 40s are weird because I think you can get away with most of your 40s on the compound interest of all the training you did before. It's like in your late 30s, early 40s, all of a sudden you're like, I can train twice a week and I still look great. And there's some sort of memory. And so you hit mid 40s and you're like, maybe not as much as twice a week, maybe a bit more. And then by the time you're hitting 50, you're like, I got to train a lot. But there is this little window where you're dipping in that bank account of all the work you've done before, that sort of sweat equity, where, late 30s and your 40s, you're just like, oh, this is easy. I don't have to push as much weight. I can only train twice a week. It's still just sort of working. And then you start realizing I got to do some more. Yeah. There is a chronology to all of this, right? The way you train it, a youth athlete at 15 is different than 25, which is different than 30s, which is different than, it just keeps going on, right? You have to train specific for your age.
Yeah. And as far as volume goes, like that I'm doing now versus what I was doing in college, I don't know if I can directly compare it because the weight was so much higher that I was on steroids, so I can't really tell. But then post-college, post-steroids, probably all through my 30s, that's when training really took a hit. Like things that I remember backing off on things like heavy squatting and deadlifting early 30s. I was kind of like, okay, I don't think I can do this anymore. Now, looking back, that's at the level I was doing. If I couldn't do 3 or 4 plates deadlift, like what's the point in doing it? Like now I deadlift with the trap bar. I don't even use a normal bar anymore. But 135 to 150 pounds just to train the posture to make sure squatting feels good at the bottom position. Like now I'm training muscle patterns more than pushing big weight. But as we can see, it doesn't change my lean mass. My lean mass is similar to what it was back then, right? So, but I have to do more total volume with these lighter weights to kind of maintain all of this and just keep the joints and the movements, the movement itself trained. So I spend a lot more time. I think I do more total work in a week, more total volume in the gym, but not volume as measured by sets times reps times weight. And then like, did I move, was this workout 50,000 pounds total weight moved versus back then? So there's something in there about, you just can't keep progressing and progressing and progressing. This might be a whole podcast on its own. This idea of progressive overload being like, how can you just progress forever?
Yeah.
Like if your peak strength was mid 30s or late 20s, early 30s, like I'm 50. Shouldn't I be lifting thousands of pounds now compared to like, should my bench press be 1,000 pounds if it was 250 pounds 15 years ago? So it doesn't keep progressing. Now I'm progressing into movement patterns and like grooving a pattern that allows me to continue squatting without getting hurt. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I just do mine are like half-hour long warm-ups and then 10 minutes of hard work. That's like it takes me that much to like, but you know what? I find that if I do really treat the warm-up as almost the most important part of the workout routine, then those last 10 minutes I can get some good push. But if I don't do that long warm-up, there's nothing there.
Right. Well, yes, you have to be much more diligent with warm-ups. It just like you can be, the thing is when you're young, you can kind of be sloppy with your warm-up. You can be sloppy with your like stretching, like maintaining joints. You can be sloppy with all of that because you just heal so easily when you're young.
Oh, dude, the warm-up for bench when we were younger was the bar, then one set of plates at 135 and two sets of plates at 225, three sets of plates for 315, and then you started adding like the fives and stuff like that. That was, you just warmed up like 90-pound increments, right? I'd blow apart right now.
It's just, but we just thought going from the bar to a 135. And a lot of guys, younger guys, that's not unfamiliar. It's like, okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
What else you can do? Now I go bar for a while after doing like rotator cuff work, and then 10 pounds, 25 pounds. Like it all has to feel good all the way up. It can't just jump right in. And then at some point it's like, okay, that now I'm actually ready for the whatever weight I can actually handle now, which is a fraction of what it used to be. Yeah. But again, it doesn't mean I have less lean mass. So for some reason, and I don't know if this is elucidated at all in the research, but for some reason, you don't need to continue lifting the same amount of weight or how the same intensity of weight to maintain the lean tissue, clearly.
I think you've done the work to get satellite cell incorporation, new myonuclei, all that sort of like heavy work was done. But my interest in this is, so we've both experienced a drop off in lean mass and then the ability to rebuild it, right? Me without TRT, you with TRT. But my question is then, how does that skew any actual research on the ability to build muscle? So had you or I been in a trial at that time, right, and just taking some time off and decide to get back into training, I mean, whatever, if you and I were in a trial and happened to be in the same group, it didn't matter if there was 30 people in each group, we would have skewed that enough that it would have been significant. Our group would have grown more than other groups just by the two of us being there, as long as they didn't remove us as outliers, right? So you wonder about the training effect, and research on muscle building is just so, and muscle building is agonizingly slow, but regaining muscle can be pretty quick. And I think that's something we need to point out, right? Like it probably takes, just to see results from a workout program, 70, 80 days, you're looking at 10, 12 weeks, just to see some results from workout. Whereas you and I are like, oh yeah, we built ourselves back up in 10 or 12 weeks, but it's because you were building back up. You weren't reaching those thresholds of intensity, volume, effort, whatever you want to call it. I like effort, that elicited some sort of actual structural change in the muscle, right? Like you had to hit those levels at a younger age where it's just like, that was hard work and I'm recovering. And now we're just playing off of filling and refilling bags of muscle, essentially bags of water.
Yeah. I don't think we actually know 100% how it all works. Like it obviously, like you said, it's differentiating the satellite cells. So they're incorporated, new nuclei are incorporated. So there's more, I don't know, there's more rubber in the balloon, but it's still a matter of inflating the balloon. Yeah. And so if you're just working with a slightly larger balloon now, so when you inflate it, it just gets bigger. But when it shrinks, they all shrink down to like nothing. So
I even like to think of it, it's funny, I've balloons right here. It's really weird. But like the very first time you blow up a balloon for a birthday party, for instance, like it's got some resistance to it. But after it's been blown up a couple of times, they blow up really easily, right? So I bet you your muscle is similar. Once it's been expanded, it can get there easier. But getting it to really kind of give and allow it to grow, that takes work.
Right. And then at some point it's at its maximum. It can't go any further. Yeah. And I think it tracks just with age over time. Like there is no experiment you can do where somebody trains for 30 years but doesn't age. And so if you could eliminate all the factors of aging that limit muscle growth, how big can that person get versus someone who just ages like
You can eliminate age as a confounder in a study involving length of time, then everything would be cool. Yeah.
But that's the point. Like, there's this question: how much muscle? Somebody has actually asked me the other day, how much muscle can you actually build without steroids? I'm like, I don't know. It's we have our calculation, but again, it's person to person.
Yeah.
But it's reasonable that there's a limit. But that limit depends on when you started training. Like, did you start? Are we talking about someone who just started working out at 50 years old, or someone who started at 15 years old? But both of them are going to hit some limit, and ironically, that's not that far apart.
I'm blanking on. There's an equation that you use to sort of when you're scaling animals, where the point where they can't get any bigger without collapsing in on themselves or under the weight of their body, right? Mm-hmm. Scary enough, that equation doesn't work underwater. So I don't know what's in the bottom of those oceans, but it could be massive, Godzilla. Mm-hmm. But on Earth, so I imagine a similar, like we talked about earlier, there's a surface area to mass equation that's used a lot in physiology. There's probably something similar to you just can't, based on your skeletal structure, you can't gain more mass, right? It would just collapse.
Well, it's genetic, right? Like in myostatin, like the myostatin gene tells your body to stop growing muscle mass. If you've ever looked up the myostatin knockout animals, like a whippet or the cow, they have double the amount of muscle mass, and that's just a gene. It's not like the cow's working out or the dog's working out. It's just missing the gene that tells the muscles to stop growing, right? And they look like the bodybuilder version of a cow and of a whippet. And it's absurd how much muscle is on their bodies. So that's just an example that there is some genetic factor that just tells it to stop. And there's only so much you can do by lifting weights to push through that limit. And then so there's two layers of pushing through that limit, just weight training and then super physiological doses of anabolics. So testosterone plus every other derivative of testosterone you can think of. I'm guessing growth hormone has some effect there. I don't know. But anyways, the point is there's limits to muscle growth. We don't actually know technically or physiologically exactly what's going on, but there is a limit.
But within that range, it can be really transient. You can go up and down. Despite the fact everyone says it stays fairly consistent, there is evidence, just without training or being sick or going off of TRT or whatever, for whatever reason, it can oscillate. So within normal ranges, you can definitely as John's example, with the exact same weight with different levels of muscle mass.
Yeah. All right. So we should probably wrap this up. What do you think the take home message here is?
I think it's just that, right? Is it understanding that you can be the exact same weight, but based on other factors, the fat mass and lean mass can change and kind of keep you at the same body weight, but massively change the look. Mm-hmm. And that if you did this is actually a really important one. If you do have to take time off, and you will lose muscle, and it is a weird experience to go through. I hated it. But just know that you can build it back, and you will build it back quickly. And it's actually almost fun how quickly it builds back. So if you have to take time off, if you've been sick or you've been injured, like, give yourself the time you need to recover. Cause I know what it's like. You want to get back in the gym and just start training, but once you're fully recovered, you hit it, you grow back quick, and it's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. And then I'll just add to that. As you age, if you do notice, and if you're being honest with yourself and you're training really consistently, but your results just aren't happening, and you're actually getting maybe even weaker, and you don't look as good, and your body composition might be going in the wrong direction in spite of all your effort, it may be worth getting your testosterone checked out, because in my little experiment, that was clearly, no matter what I did in the gym, a lack of testosterone. I just shrank. I just shriveled up. So,
nice.
All right. So I think that's a good place to leave it. So for Brad Pilon, I'm John Barbin, and that's your Phi Life Podcast.